So now, as you can see, our page doesn't look good at all. Therefore, we need to add some designs to these elements in order to make our page look amazing and give the user the best possible user experience. So I'm going to head on over back to my project, and then what I'm going to do is that I'm going to here in the index, I'm going to add CSS. I'm going to be using CSS in order to add designs to this page. So what I'm going to do is that here I'm going to add CSS here in the head. In the head here, I'm going to add CSS. Let me just maximize this, and then here I'm going to add CSS by using the style tag in order just to show you, both the HTML and also the CSS in the same place, and later you can move it to another file. But for now, I'm going to leave it here. So first of all, we need to give our body tag here some design. So the body is going to have a font family of, let's say, monospace, and you can change. And by the way, you don't have to follow all of these. You don't have to apply all of the design that I'm going to give you. It depends upon which design you want to apply to your elements. But I found that this is for me, it's the best design. I like that design, so I'm gonna apply that design. Let me now here add design to the chat box itself. So the chat box obviously is an ID. So I'm gonna say here chat box, and that chat box is going to have margin left of auto, and also margin right of auto. So margin right auto, and I'm gonna make the width only 40% because I don't want to display. I don't want. Let me here add percent. I don't want the width to take the chatbot to take the complete width of the screen. I just want it to be 40%. And then I'm gonna also add a margin top, and that margin top, and the margin top is gonna be 50px. So this is for the chat box. Now let's work on. Here we have the bot text. Let's work on that. So I'm gonna add here dot and then bot text. And since this is a class, of course we need to add here dot. So the bot text, we want to add some designs to it. So I'm gonna say here bot text, and then let's change the font family to another font family. I'm gonna say here let's also use the monospace, and for the font size I'm gonna change the font size to be 16px, and the text align left. I want to display the text that will be sent by the chatbot on the left of the screen. And I also want to add some line height. Line height is very important. I'm going to add a line height of 25px, and I'm going to also change the color of that text to blue. I want blue color to that text. And this is for the bot text. Let's work now on the user input. So the user input is an ID. I'm gonna here use the user input, which is an ID. So for the user input, let's add here for the user input, let's add a margin and also a width. Let's change the width and also the margin. So the margin, I'm gonna say that the margin left and margin right auto, because I want to give that user input an awesome design. So I'm gonna also add here margin right, also auto, and I want the width to be also to have the same width as, remember, as the chat box. We want them to have the same exact design. And then I'm gonna here also add a margin top of 50px, and this is for the user input. Now let's work on the text input itself. So the text input is an ID. So I'm gonna say here text input, And the text input obviously is the text that the user is going to type. So I'm going to add for this text input, I'm going to add border to this text input, border button, and I'm going to say 3px, and then solid, and let's add some color, just a random color. And this is a gray color, a degree of the gray color. And the font family also, let's change the font family to the monospace. And the font size, I'm gonna change the font size to be 16 because it's very important to keep the font size the same for all of these inputs, because you want to kind of be consistent throughout your designs and make all of the in terms of the font, it's very important to keep the font the same for the text that the user is going to type, and also the text that will be sent by the chatbot. So this is for the text input. Let's now work on the button input. And I'm going to add a padding to this button. Padding 5px, and I'm going to also change the font family to be also monospace. And finally, I'm going to add a font size. I'm going to change the font size to be 16 also, font size 16, as I told you, because we want to keep things consistent here. So now that we have all of these elements designed, let me save and let me head on over back to the browser. But before I do so, let me also add some designs to this H1, because we didn't add H1 here, we didn't add designs to this. So here let's add a let's center it. So I'm going to say text align, and then I'm going to center this H1, and I think we are done. Let me just save now, and let me head on over back to the browser to show you the result. So let me refresh, and now as you can see, let me zoom out, our chatbot looks much better. Of course, we need to work a little bit further on the design, because there is here it needs to be kind of pushed to the right a little. So I'm gonna change a little bit here in the design. Here I'm gonna change the user input here to, instead of 40, I'm gonna say here 80%, and I'm gonna center. I'm gonna say here text align center, text align center. And now let me save and let me refresh, and it should look much better. As you can see, now it's centered, and the message that is gonna be sent by the chatbot is gonna be displayed on the left side, as you can see. So it looks amazing.
So now it's time to work on getting the text that the user is going to type here and send it to our application in order to respond here, in order to let the chatbot respond. But how are we going to do that? Well, first of all, let me explain the logic behind this. First of all, once the user types something here and then clicks on send, what we need to do is that obviously we need to get that text, and then we need to send it. We need to send it to our Flask here. So we need to create a route that will get that text, that will respond. We'll get first that text, and then we'll respond by using, remember, by using the get response, and sends the response back to the user and displays the response here so that the user sees that response. But in order to send that text, in order to make a connection between the input and Flask application, we need JavaScript. So I'm going to be using jQuery. Of course, you can use vanilla JavaScript, but jQuery is it's better in terms of the code. It's easier in terms of the code. Instead of creating a very long code that's going to send or make a request using vanilla JavaScript, you can simply use jQuery, and the code would be much less. So you can head on over to code.jquery.com, and then I'm going to be using jQuery here. You can click on this, on compressed, and then you can copy this script. I'm going to be using, obviously, I'm going to be using a CDN version of jQuery instead of downloading it. So I'm going to copy this. You need to copy it. Click here to copy that link. And then you need to head on over back to your application. And in the index, you must include this in the beginning here in the top before the styles. I'm going to just paste it. And now we have jQuery in our application. So now we can start working on the logic and add our code here. So how are we going to do that? Well, let me show you what I'm going to be doing. So obviously now that we have jQuery, I'm going to here at the bottom, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create a script and use jQuery. So here, just above the closing body tag, I'm going to create here a script. And that script obviously is going to be using jQuery script. So here inside that script, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create a function that's going to first get that text from the user, get that text, and then send it to our Flask application, and then Flask will use this get response to send a response back to us here in the to the user in the index.html. And obviously once the response is sent to the HTML, it will be displayed here, and the user will see everything, will be able to look at the conversation between him or her and the chatbot. So here, again, back to the index.html, I'm going to here create a function, and then I'm going to name this function get user response, and then this function is going to be using obviously jQuery. So what I'm going to do, first of all, I'm going to get the text from this text input. So I'm going to say here, I'm going to say $sign because I'm using jQuery. And if you don't know jQuery, don't worry, it's just very, very simple. Just follow along and you will understand, and I'll also walk you through the code. So first of all, I'm going to make a reference here to this ID text input. So it's text input. Let me just get close to this, and then here I'm going to make a reference to this in order to get the text from that text input, and then .val, which is a function given by jQuery, and this function is going to get the text from that text input. So it's going to pull out the text from this input and store it in a variable. So I'm going to create here a variable called user text. User text is going to be equal to this. So now we have the text from the user. What I'm going to do is that I am going to display that text that's sent by the user here immediately, because immediately after the user types something here and clicks on send, we need to display that text here, but we also need to get it. So we need to do two things. First, we need to get it and send it to Flask, and we also want to display it here because we want to tell the user, hey user, the text that you have typed here has been sent and it's now displayed here. So I'm gonna first here use, I'm gonna create here a variable called var and then user HTML, and it's gonna be equal to a paragraph p, and then this p is gonna have a class because I want to add designs to the text that the user is gonna send. Once the user sends that text, we want to display it here, and I want to add designs to that element that will be injected here in the page. So here I'm gonna create a class, and that class is gonna be named user text, and I'm gonna also add span as I did, exactly as I did with, as I have done with the bot text. So here span, and inside that span I want here span, and let me first close this P. Inside that span I'm going to display the text. So I'm going to say here user text. I'm going to display the user text here in between. And now we have this variable, the user HTML. We need to inject that into our page. So we can of course do that using jQuery very easily. I'm going to here first I'm going to remove the text from this input, because once the user clicks on it, we will get it displayed here and remove it from this input. I'm not going to keep it here. I'm not going to keep the text that the user has typed here in this input. So I'm going to say here $, and then here $, and then again reference to this text input, and then I'm going to say that val, and then that value is going to be empty. So the value is going to be empty, is just going to be empty. And then I'm going to inject that user input to our page. So I'm going to make a reference again using the $, and then here chat box. Remember this chat box, and then I'm going to inject by using the append. I'm going to inject that user HTML. So I'm going to pass this user HTML into the chatbot, which is the container of which works as a container of our conversation. And then now it's very important to also kind of scroll, because as the conversation gets many messages, we will not have enough space here. So we need to scroll automatically as the conversation gets longer and longer. So here I'm going to say document dot get element by ID, and then user input, which is this user input, and then I'm going to say dot scroll into view. So I'm going to say scroll into view, and then I'm going to just here pass an object block, and I'm going to just say start, and then comma, and then behavior, and then smooth, smooth. And this is very important, because we want again to give the user the best possible user experience. So now what we need to do is that we need to make a request and send that text that the user is going to type. So in order to send it, we need to make a GET request. So I'm going to here use jQuery to do that. So I'm going to here use $, and then GET to make a GET request. And then this GET is going to take the URL. The URL, I'm going to name it GET. And of course, this URL must be created in our Flask application. But for now, we don't have that route yet. But we need to create shortly. We need to create later. We need to create this /get. And this GET request is going to take the message that the user is going to type, which is the user text, which is this. So I'm going to say here in an object, we need first to use the name. The name is user message. This is very, very important. It must be here user message. Here it must be user message. And then the message itself, which is the user text. So user message, and then the message, the user text. user text. And then after that, we just call the done, and then we upon done here, we will pass I'm gonna pass a callback function to let us know that to return actually a response. So the response can be here data, can be named data. So this callback function will be sent upon success, and it will send us the data here in this function as a parameter, and then we can use this data in order to display an HTML inside our chat box here. So I'm going to use this data to get the data and display it. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to make a reference to our chat box again, chat box, and then I'm going to say here dot append, and then I need to append the data. But this data we can't just pass it here. It's not going to look amazing. Therefore, we need to pass it inside a HTML. So I'm going to create an HTML and pass this data into our HTML. So I'm going to create here a variable called bot HTML, which is the response from the chatbot. Because again, once the user sends the message to Flask, what's going to happen is that Flask is going to use this get response and send that response, which is the chat response, to the user. And that chat response is this data. It's just this data. So we need to here we need to use p paragraph, and then inside that paragraph I'm gonna again use span, and then span, and this, remember, span, this paragraph has a class called bot text. Remember, we have here bot text, so it must be bot text in order for this paragraph to have the same exact design. And then we need here to pass the data here, plus, and then I'm gonna pass the data in between, data here, data. And finally, I'm going to pass the data here in the chat box, bot text. I'm going to pass not the data, but the bot HTML, because it contains the data as well as the tags. So it's going to look amazing. And we are done with this part. Let me add here semicolon with this part. But something very important we need to do is calling this function. We created this function, but we did not call it. So it's useless until we call it. So when should I call this function? Well, this function should be called upon clicking on the send button or upon hitting the enter key on the user's keyboard, right? Because once the user clicks on send or hits the enter keyboard, we need to call this get user response and execute this function to get the data from the user, to get the text from the user, and also to take care of all of this, all of these things. So we need here to do that. So I'm gonna I'm gonna use jQuery here to accomplish that. So I'm gonna make a reference to the text input, and then I'm gonna say dot key press, and then here function, the callback function, and then the event. And then what we need to do is that we need to first check the key that the user has clicked on. If the user clicks here dot which to check which button the user clicked on. If the user clicked on button number 13, which is the enter button, if the user hits the enter button, then we need to call the get user response. And we also want to add a to make another reference to the button here, button input, because we also want to execute the same function once the user clicks on the button, once the user clicks on this send. So I'm going to say here button input and then click, and then function, and then upon calling the callback function, I'm just going to use the get user response. I'm going to just call the get user response to send the message and take care of everything. So now we are done with the JavaScript part, which is just going to take the data from the user, and also it's going to display it here, and it's going to make a request. So it's going to make a lot of things. But this is the JavaScript part. So now it's time to work on the route that will let us receive the text that the user is going to type, and also will let us respond and display the response here. So I'm going to head on over to our application, and in the index.py, I need here to create a route at app and then .root, and that route must be named /get, because in the index.html in the JavaScript, I have made a request to this /get. So I need here to have a route that has this /get. This is very, very important. And then I'm going to here create a function, and I'm going to name it get chatbot response. And this get chatbot response is obviously going to get, first of all, it's going to get the text from the user. Remember, the text from the user, which is this. So you need to get it. In order to get it, all you need to do is that you need to use the request, which is associated with, here associated with Flask. So you need to import it from Flask. Here you need to add a comma and then / and then request. This is very, very important. You need to import the request. And then using this request, I'm gonna call here the arguments, and then .get. Which argument do we want to get? Well, we want to get, remember, the key was, let me head on over back. The key was user message. So you need to pass the user message because it contains the user text. So the user message here in the get, you need to pass it here. And then you need to store this in a variable. Let me here say user text. And then now that we have the user text, we need to let the chatbot respond. And to let the chatbot respond, we already know that we can use the bot.get response. So I'm going to use here bot.get get response, get underscore response. And of course it takes this get response, takes the user text as a parameter, user text. And finally we need to return this to the user, because it would be just meaningless to create all of this without returning the response from the chatbot to the user. So we need here to say return, and this must also be passed. Remember, it must be passed inside the string because we want to return a string. So I'm going to say here str, and I'm going to pass the response inside that str. And now the chatbot is going to respond and send that response. But where is this response going to be sent? This response is going to be sent here to the callback function, which is this data, and it's going to be injected or added to these tags, and these tags will be injected into the chatbot, which is the conversation block. So it's going to be injected into our front end, and the user will be able to see that response from the chatbot.
So let's now test our application. But before I do so, you need to uncomment these two lines because you want to train your chatbot. You can either train your chatbot using the corpus class, or you can simply use the list trainer if you don't want to use the corpus class. But by the way, this one is going to take a lot of time. It's going to take a lot of time because obviously it's going to train your chatbot on a lot of data. So you need to save once you have uncommented these two lines. You need to save, and then you need to run your application. And I have already executed my file because it's gonna take a lot of time, as I told you. As you can see, it's gonna train your chatbot with all of these data, and then it's gonna deploy your application on your local server. As you can see, this is my local server. So let me head on to my browser and show you the result. So let's now test our chatbot. Let me send a message. I'm gonna say, "How are you? How are you?" And then I'm gonna click on send, and it will be sent. And then I'm gonna be waiting for a response. Here it says, "I'm just an artificial intelligence." And by the way, it takes some time to get this message because we are making a request to our server and we are waiting for a response. So as you can see, now we can interact with our chatbot, and I can send as many messages to this chatbot as I want, and the chatbot is going to respond accordingly. And as the conversation gets longer, for example, if you keep asking and if you keep sending questions and messages, for example here, politics. If you keep asking the chatbot and if the conversation gets longer, what's gonna happen is that the chatbot will automatically scroll to the last message. So let me just keep asking the chatbot some questions. Do you like art? So as you can see, the chatbot will automatically scroll to the last message, and this is awesome because it gives the user that amazing user experience. And something we need to work on is the position of this message on the screen. As you can see, my messages are being displayed on the left side, and the chatbot messages are also being displayed on the left side of the screen. But let's, for example, if you want to display your own messages or the users messages on the right side, you can do that using CSS. So if you head on over back to your project, specifically if you head on over to the index.html, you can do that by adding here to this user input. Let me show you that here. User input, the user text, not the user input, because the user text has the text itself, which is this one. Let me show you this user text, this one user text. So I'm gonna here I'm gonna say user text, and then it's gonna have text align, and then right. We want to display it on the right side. So I'm gonna say here text user text, and then text align right. Let me now save and head on over back to the browser and refresh. And now if you refresh and start sending messages to the chatbot, let me here say hi and then send. As you can see, the message will be displayed on the right side instead of the left side. So now my messages will be displayed on the right side, whereas the messages or responses that I am gonna get from the chatbot will be displayed on the left. And by the way, you can also add here chatbot and then colon, and also user and colon. So you can here say, you can always say here in this user HTML, you can here say user, because this is the user, and then for the chatbot you can always here say chatbot, here chatbot. Of course outside this, so it should be here actually chatbot. And now let me save and let me refresh and show you what's gonna happen if you refresh, and then if you send a message, it's gonna say user and then hi. In the response, you should also get chatbot and then chatbot first and then colon and then how are you, or how are you doing. So it's working and it's great, and I think the user is gonna have an amazing user experience.